Welcome to the Swine Health Black Belt Podcast, the latest swine health research digested for you. My name is Dr. Clayton Johnson, your host for today's episode, and joining me from Iowa State University is Dr. Gaurav Rawal. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Rawal.
Hi, Dr. Clayton Johnson. Thank you for invitation.
My pleasure to host you. I know that we have communicated with each other several times through the years, but please, for the audience that may not have had the pleasure to meet you, please introduce yourself.
So I'm Gaurav Rawal. I did my DVM from Nepal in 2014. I came to US in 2017 for my master's degree in Veterinary Preventive Medicine with Dr. Linhares and Dr. Bailey Arruda. So after completing my master's, I joined Dr. Jianqiang Zhang at Iowa State in Department of VDPAM for my Ph.D. degree. After my DVM, I spent 2 years in feed industry, working as a technical service officer. My research interest is on diagnosing and researching on swine viruses, particularly PRRS virus, but I'm also interested in working with other swine pathogens such as influenza A virus, coronaviruses, and astroviruses.
Very good. I know that you're here to join us today to bring your expertise about PRRS diagnostic technologies, and in particular, PCR-specific assays that look for modified live PRRS vaccines. Could you talk to us a little bit about why is this important? Why is there a demand for a PCR for PRRS that is specific to different types of vaccine viruses?
Yes, sure. So as you know, we are using these MLV vaccines quite a lot to prevent and control PRRS. So which is the best way we can say to prevent and control the PRRS right now we have. And if we see the VDL data over the years, the PCR cases is doubling in the last 10 years. We have a lot of PCR results right now, but the problem with the result, there's a problem with the result interpretation, whether these results are positive by vaccine or from the wild type. We do have a sequencing tool to differentiate the vaccine type and wild type, such as Sanger sequencing, whole genome sequencing, but these tools are fairly expensive, and also the turnaround time is 3 to 5 days for them. Mm-hmm. Apart from them, these sequencing tools also require a better quality RNA in the sample. So you will need to have a decent CT of, let's say, 28 or less than that for PRRS. In other hand, the vaccine-based PCR, the turnaround time is the same day for same like a commercial screening PCR, which you have right now, and it is cheaper. It's just $35 in ISU VDL right now. So another point is that this vaccine-based PCR, for instance, in our case is PRRS vaccine-specific PCR, they can successfully detect the vaccine virus in a sample, even the wild type is co-present there. So let's say when we always have this scenario, when we do a vaccine challenge study, we want to see how long the vaccine is setting in the sample. So using these vaccine-specific assays, we can detect that when the wild type is co-present in the sample.
Very good. So I can see many different applications of that sort of technology, and probably the most common one, I would imagine, is sample goes to the diagnostic lab, it is positive on the initial screening PCR, and then we do a follow-up test on maybe a vaccine-specific PCR for the specific vaccine that we were using in our herd if we think there's one there. Do you have, knowing that there are multiple different MLV strains that are out there, do you have assays developed at this point, Guarav, for all of the different MLVs that are commercially available in the United States?
So yeah, we are in the process of developing a multiplex PCR for the first vaccine assays. So we have in-house, we have Dr. Harmon have previously developed some vaccine-specific PCR for Prevacent, Fostera, PrimePack. So me and my professor, Dr. Zhang, we also trying to develop that. We are the work is under progress right now. So very soon, I think we will be able to provide that multiplex assay for detecting at least, I'm not sure if we were able to include all of them because we have right now 6 MLV vaccines in the market, but we will try to accommodate the most used one.
Today, of the 6 available, do you have most of those available as an individual PCR that can be requested?
Yes, we do. It's under R&D, but we do have them.
Very good. How about the sensitivity of those assays that are vaccine-specific assays? Are they as sensitive as the overall PRRS PCR assay, or maybe a little less sensitive?
So in this study, when we derived this first guard vaccine PCR assay, we found the sensitivity actually very similar to commercial assay. So in this case, we used the Vetmax from Thermo Fisher. So what we found when we did the analytical sensitivity, it was 10 to the power 5 dilution when we did a serial dilution with vaccine virus. But and we also did with the analytical sensitivity with the RNA, that IVT RNA, and the limit of detection for this assay was 16 genomic copies per reaction. So overall, I think it's a very good analytical sensitivity from the assay. And if we talk about the performance of the assay when we evaluate it against the reference PCR, so analytical, like overall, the diagnostic sensitivity was about 95%.
Okay. Do you have a CT threshold that you advise veterinarians on, where if you are lower than this CT on the regular PRRS assay, the first screening PRRS PCR, we would expect it to be successful on the vaccine, if that's what it is, or is just any positive, no matter what the CT is worth testing on the vaccine-specific assay to see if it's there, because any positive on the overall PRRS PCR will also be a positive on the vaccine-specific one.
I think we can say that I don't think we will divide them by the like in the sequencing. We will not divide the sample by the CT. With these two different assays. Mm-hmm. But I have to say this to you, that for the first guard assay, we put a cutoff of 36, and for the reference PCR, like the normal Thermo PCR we have right now in the VDL, we have a cutoff of 37. So why we did that is that when we see the overall data, from the serum samples, from the oral fluid samples, we try to be consistent, and then hence we did that. We put a cutoff of 36 for the first guard PCR. But I don't think we need to say, okay, we can send these samples for first guard. We cannot send these samples for screening.
Dr. Rawal, the reality is with a lot of these PRRS infections, there's not just one virus there. There may be multiple field strains. There may be a field strain and a vaccine. Theoretically, there could be multiple vaccines present within a sample. How do you handle those situations from a diagnostic assay standpoint? Are you able to differentiate multiple infections from single, or say there is a wild type virus and the MLV virus together in the sample? Will the MLV assay still pick up a positive result? How can you help us think through the diagnostic steps for that situation?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, so this assay we recommend to use with the reference PCR, with the commercial PCR, because the vaccine-specific PCR will only tell you whether vaccine virus is present, yes or no. That's it. So any positive first guard or negative vaccine assay cannot exclude the presence of wild type or presence of another vaccine strain. So back to your question. So if we have the reference PCR data and then we have this vaccine-specific PCR data, so we can see whether we can check the data and we'll see whether the vaccine virus is present in it or not. So like you said, there's a co-present situation, right? So if it's one strain, yeah, we can do that with one vaccine-specific assay, and the screening PCR, we can see that. But for detecting the multiple vaccine strain, we need to have a multiplex assay for that. Yeah.
Very good. Gaurav, can you give producers and veterinarians any advice on when they should use the assay for just a specific MLV strain versus requesting a sequence? Do you have any recommendations there for the best cases for either option on the diagnostics?
So yeah, this is little hard to say, because if I have to suggest to the producers, like if we know, sometimes we know what we are putting in the pigs, right? Let's say we put the first guard vaccine in the pig and we want to see the setting, like how long the vaccine is setting in the pigs, yes or no. Mm-hmm. So then this assay can be good for you but still you need to use both assays, the commercial and the vaccine specific. That's a recommendation. We cannot go without that. Sure. But if we don't know anything what you have put in the pigs, so we still need to rely on the sequencing to see what's going on there.
And I know sometimes for me, it's simply a function of time. Any evidence tomorrow or today may be better than no evidence or waiting for the sequencing. So there are times where if I'm really pushed to make a decision with the information I have, I may request both. I may request the sequencing to get that in process, and then also request a MLV specific PCR to try and get that information as fast as possible too. I would imagine that's a fairly common request at the diagnostic lab now.
Yes, exactly. Yep, that's the follow-up with the clients here.
Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I think it's very good information. And to our audience, thank you very much for listening to the Swine Health Black Belt podcast. Please visit us at swinehealthblackbelt.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on next week's episode. Thanks and have a great week.
Hey everyone. We're always searching for the latest and greatest research to share each week. If you have a swine health-related research trial and would like to come on the show to talk about it with me and share it with our audience, feel free to send an email to healthblackbelt@swineit.com, and we would love to take a look at your research.